Today we're going to start out with a summary of chapter 10. Besides for like the first 2 pages of the chapter, it's an otherwise pretty boring chapter. So we're going to summarize it and then we'll start with chapter 11. So chapter 10 starts out, it's the night of the big game with the Broncos against the Team Liberty, their biggest rivals. And the coach is giving them a pep talk before the start of the game. At the end of the pep talk, Nelson seems exceedingly angry. He does a bunch of things. He picks up a bench and swings it over everyone's heads. Luckily, they all duck in time, but instead it hits a row of lockers and the bench shatters. He then charges into the whiteboard head first with his helmet on, causing the whiteboard to crack. And then he picks up a 45-pound plate and throws it at the wall, taking a chunk of the wall out with him. The coach finally jumps behind him and tackles him and benches him, which is when Nelson then tells everyone that he knows Melissa is cheating on him, but he's not sure with who. And he does say that he cannot play the game knowing that, the guy that's sleeping with his girlfriend could be out there. The game starts. Dipsy's being wild in the stands, cursing, being all angry. And the game kind of goes on and on. Jake and Todd obviously have a little bit of a heated battle, a heated tension on the field, Rick describes it. But Rick also says that the whole team seems to be feeling differently toward Jake at this point. The Broncos do win. This is their first big win against their rival in a long time. And Rick does say it's a lot because Jake does a good job long snapping and Rick gets those final few points, which is what makes the difference between them winning and losing. But still, everyone swarms Todd, including Dee Dee. And Jake says it's just, Jake says that Dee Dee's only swarming Todd because she really feels like she needs to help him keep his image, even though she is with Jake now. Finally, Rick ends the book with saying, Dee Dee's not that self-sacrificing. And he kind of admits that Dee Dee is actually pretty selfish as he's getting to know her. With that, let's get started with chapter 11. All right, open your books, and we are going to start on page 125. Chapter 11. Just as Jake's parties had acquired an unpleasant taste, the tone at school was beginning to turn ugly. The buzz was still all about Jake. Now that his long snapping had lifted the pathetic Broncos to victory, he was more famous than ever. But the speculation about him had become suspicious, derisive. Jake had no longer dropped from heaven to provide high-quality Friday night entertainment. He was putting something over on us, playing us. And the mysterious attributes that had proved so irresistible before were simply more proof that the low-down sneak was up to no good. So what this is kind of explaining is that people are still gossiping and talking about Jake, but the gossip and talk is starting to turn. What used to make him so cool, the fact that nobody knew anything about him and he just held these really awesome parties, is now what's hurting him. Nobody knows anything about him, so now they kind of feel negatively towards him. I mean, he's a cool guy and all that, a junior girl was saying in the cafeteria on Monday. But this but was a telltale feature of several conversations I overheard that week. Jake was cool. Jake was great. He was fun. But where does he get the money for such huge parties? She finished. Well, obviously, he's dealing drugs, replied one of her friends. You don't make that kind of money cash delivering the Tribune. You guys are missing the point, put in another girl. The parties are a cover for the dealing. I've heard Jake's running a supermarket over there. I don't know, the first speaker was dubious. I've been to a couple of those parties and I never saw anything like that. Are you kidding? The third girl crowed. Babies could get born and no one would notice at Jake's place. It was interesting. I knew exactly where Jake's money was coming from, and it had nothing to do with drugs. But there were kids who swore up and down they'd seen Jake selling X and loose joints in the upstairs hall. And did anyone plan to skip the next bash to avoid being swept up in the narcotics sting operation? Not on your life. So everybody's spreading these kind of horrible rumors about Jake, saying that he's a drug dealer and that's where he makes all his money from. And Rick is like, he kind of knows that that's fake because he knows, Jake's making all the money selling term papers, but he still watches everybody make these rumors. And then he points out that still nobody's going to miss the party itself, though, right? Like, heaven forbid, we can't miss the fun party. We can just gossip and be mean about the host who's holding it. Those parties are the only excitement we've got around here, said a tall red-haired boy in the food line. Another weird thing, going by the buzz at Fitz, it seemed like everybody in school was a regular Friday night attendee. The parties were crowded, sure, but not with 1,800 people. Guys were speaking with authority on the layout of the Garrett home and the location of the best makeout spots. Most of them had to be lying, but the rumors were so wild anyway. It was hard to tell who. I think some kids were so wrapped up in the Jake world that they almost believed they had been there, the way your mind can manufacture real memories of things your parents say you did as a young child. As Jake's right-hand man, I picked up my share of piercing stares and dirty looks that week. Phil Brackett gave me another lecture on the subject of my unwittingly helping Jake screw us over. I stuck up for Jake. It's just a few parties, that's it. And you don't think it's weird that the guy came out of nowhere? He didn't come out of nowhere, I explained patiently. He went to a different school last year, and he lives here now, and because he's new, he throws parties to get to know people. Well, I think he's a narc, Phil spat out. A cop? Working undercover as a student. It's a sting against underage drinking. And he hasn't found it yet? I laughed. That would make him the dumbest cop on the force. Phil was undaunted. Maybe he's biding his time waiting to move in. Trust me, I assured him. If Jake arrested every underage drinker he saw, this school would be empty. This is crazy, Phil. He looked at me resentfully. That's not what Todd said. I was instantly alert. Todd Buckley? But who else could he be talking about? Actually, it made perfect sense. Our great and exalted quarterback had soured on Jake. Therefore, it was only a matter of time before everyone else fell in line. I love high school. It's a great place for individuality to flourish. So another rumor that we see spread about Jake is that now people are saying he could also be a cop that's trying to catch underage drinkers, which Rick thinks is stupid because he's like, well, he'd already have caught everybody in this building because he's seen almost everybody drink underage at his parties. And then we find out the true source of all these rumors is Todd Buckley. Now that Todd has kind of figured out about the cheating with his girlfriend, he's trying to turn the whole school's opinions of Jake against him. I cornered Todd in the locker room before practice. What have you been telling people about Jake? He scowled at me. I knew you'd defend him. Defend him from what? I exploded. He hasn't done anything. The guy has a few parties and you've got him ratting for the cops. How do you know he isn't? Todd shot back. He appears out of thin air and suddenly he's on the Broncos. He's throwing parties. He's all over school. Every toilet around here is stopped up with Jake Garrett. I've got the citywide college recruiting seminar tomorrow, and there will be players there from McKinley. Maybe Jake did the same thing over there. I'm going to get to the bottom of this guy if it's the last thing I do. You know exactly what he's up to, I muttered bitterly. That's what really bothers you, isn't it? You're the big expert when it comes to messing around with other people's girlfriends. For a minute, I thought he might take a swing at me, but instead he fixed me with a snake-eyed glare. Don't go there, Rick. You think you're hot stuff because you kick a few field goals, but let's see how popular you are if you get on my bad side. Rick actually is really standing up for Jake here, which I think is a good thing. I think Jake needs somebody standing up for him. But one of the things I love is that Rick, who has pretty much this whole book been like, I can't upset Todd because it'll ruin my reputation, finally seems to be getting to a point where he's like, I don't really care what anybody thinks about me. I'm going to stand up for myself and for my friend a little bit, which is a really big step, knowing what we know so far about Rick. He seems to be growing a little bit as a character. And his big thing is to confront Todd about cheating. When he says, you're an expert in messing with other people's girlfriends, you know exactly what's going on. He's saying, Jake is sleeping with your girlfriend. I only saw Jake at practice, with Todd in the vicinity, so it was hard to get a sense of what the man himself thought of all this. Jake had become almost an automaton around the Broncos these days, performing his simple function and staying out of everybody's way. But that was mostly because none of the other players talked to him anymore. That's why when I rounded the corner to my locker on Thursday and found myself staring into the depths of the Jake's smile, I couldn't help but grinning. I liked being Jake's best friend, and that didn't change with the tide of public opinion. Hey, baby, he pumped my hand while gently but insistently guiding me away from my locker. What do you say we ditch the afternoon? Call it a mental health sabbatical. I thought it over for about a nanosecond. With Todd at the center of Fitzgerald Football Universe, away at the recruiting seminar, practice was probably going to be a joke anyway. Just some basic drills and a ton of calisthenics. And as for classes, I'm in, I agreed. We should probably talk anyway. I'm sure you'd notice things with Todd are getting kind of nasty. He seemed completely serene. Oh, I'm not worried about him. Yeah, well, I am, I told him. Todd's got a lot of clout around this place, and he can make things pretty unpleasant for you if he sets his mind to it. But Jake just led the way out into the Beamer in the parking lot. He seemed to be in a fantastic mood. I settled myself in the passenger seat. Where to? It's a surprise. It did surprise me, although it shouldn't have. We cruised through the neighborhoods of the colonials, ranches, and splits that made up my mother's business universe until we pulled up at a gas station just out of sight of St. Mary's School for Girls. Dee Dee waited expectantly at the passenger door until I got out and sat down in the back. Jennifer crawled right over me and stretched luxuriously across the soft leather. You're on my half, I told her. I love you too, Ricky, she purred. Hey, ladies, beamed Jake as Dee Dee sidled over and began nibbling on his neck. School burned down? The mere mention of school seemed to deflate Dee Dee's passion. Ugh, don't I wish, she grumbled, slumping in her seat. School can't be that bad, I goaded her. You've got your old math tutor back, right? Jake cast a beseeching look over his shoulder. Apparently, not much tutoring had been going on during those long nights at the Garrett household. We headed downtown to the small Greenwich Village wannabe neighborhood that surrounded the Atlantica University. A wannabe neighborhood that surrounded the Atlantica University campus. Cruising the main drag with the windows open, Jake exchanged greetings and the occasional high five with various research paper customers we passed. Connor Danvers was one of them. And to my surprise, he greeted Jake like a long-lost brother, risking life and limb to stand on the center line to embrace the guy. The subject of the late quantum physics paper never came up. We're on for Friday night at your place, right? Connor enthused. Anything I should bring? People, Jake said readily. The more the merrier, baby. Oh, they're lining up to come, Connor assured him. I have to say, this always really weirds me out. And I'll say it like this. No college student wants to attend a high school kids party. So you got to figure these are like the losers of the college campus that want to actually spend their Friday nights at a high school kids bash. I tried to sound a cautious note. If that lunatic invites the whole world, you'd better be shopping for a bigger house. But I could tell that Jake was in his glory. He had Dee Dee at his side, seeing him being treated like a big shot at a college campus, no less. It was working, too. Her look of rapturous admiration was too total to be faked. It was eerily similar to the expression she wore when playing her Academy Award role of God's girlfriend. Even Jennifer had no taste for discouraging words today. Oh, mellow out, Ricky. We had a high-caffeine, high-sugar lunch of mochas and monster cookies at Starbucks on the corner and checked out a few stores. Jake and Dee Dee kind of melted into each other as the tour progressed until they could hardly move, exposited literally together in the style of a three-legged race. "Those two should get a room," I whispered to Jennifer. "Right now, I've got an afternoon off and Jake has a BMW," was her reply, "so don't hassle it." Eventually, we were back in the car, parking on a deserted dead-end street, a bad punt from the dirty blue water of Lake Michigan. It was a makeout spot, no question about it. I glared at the back of Jake's head. Didn't he notice that his two rear passengers weren't dating? In the front, Dee Dee crawled over the gear shift console into Jake's lap. It was an awkward operation because of the position of the steering wheel, but she managed to make it look sexy because she was Dee Dee. I rolled my eyes at Jennifer, who shrugged. This isn't happening, I thought, trying to ignore the sounds that were coming up there. It was a joke, right? Surely we weren't stuck here while those two did what came naturally. A light fog began to materialize on the inside of the Beamer's windows. Jennifer reached over and traced out "help" with her finger. I grinned appreciatively and wrote "contents under pressure" on my side. All at once, she grabbed my hand. "Hey, stud, let's show these amateurs how it's done." "Right, warrior princess." I jumped on her lap with an exaggerated moan. We overbalanced and keeled over sideways across the back seat in a symphony of manufactured slurping noises. The lovebirds gave no indication that they'd noticed. They wouldn't have noticed a mortar attack. So Jennifer and Rick are kind of playing and trying to mess with Dee Dee and Jake right now, who are making out uncomfortably in the front seat. We forged ahead, determined to make our point. I hooked my foot over the top of Dee Dee's headrest, working up enough hyperventilation to erase the messages on the misted windows. Jennifer pulled off her scarf and tossed it over the front seat. In what I hoped was a vampire-like gesture, I buried my face in her neck and blew a loud raspberry. Laughing, she put her arms around my back and hung on. "Behold, princess, I hear the trumpet battle," I declared, digging in for another blow. I felt her fingers burrowing into my hair, pressing my lips against her skin too hard for bulging. "You're crushing the trumpet of the battle," I said in a muffled voice. That was when I noticed that Jennifer wasn't laughing anymore, or squirming to avoid my weight. The realization was a jagged fork of lightning that stretched from my head to a lower, less public part of my anatomy. What was the deal here? Was this a joke? She wasn't joking. She was into it. Or was she? This was Jennifer, after all. I shrugged off the sting. Today I'd find out one way or the other. Sure, I might make an idiot out of myself. Family, friends, I'd never be able to escape the embarrassment. There could be no dignified retreat. Jennifer would become my Vietnam. On the other hand, why should I be the only person who thought about the consequences in this town? Nobody else ever did. Melissa cheated on Nelson. Todd cheated on Dee Dee. Dee Dee cheated on Todd. It was happening just a few feet in front of me. Jake and Dee Dee swamping tonsillectomies and God knows what else. Jennifer had the right idea. It's all about me. From this moment on, Rick Paradis did what felt good for Rick Paradis, starting in the back seat of the car that had replaced Jake Garrett's mother. I maneuvered my mouth to Jennifer's and froze. The thrashing around behind the steering wheel had ceased abruptly, to be replaced by whispers. Jake's voice. It was garbled, but the phrase, "break up with Todd," was unmistakably there several times. "Don't ruin it," Dee Dee hissed, louder than Jake. I caught a meaningful glance from Jennifer. She was listening too. Whatever moment had been under construction between us, it was over. We were eavesdroppers now, ears at the keyhole. Jake was speaking again, his persistence clear, even though his low voice was not. Dee Dee kept interrupting. No, shut up! Until finally she rasped, "Why do you always have to spoil everything? Isn't it enough that I'm with you now?" She was back in the passenger seat in a heartbeat. "We're going home." It wasn't a suggestion, it was a proclamation. It took the Beamer's defoggers only a few seconds to erase all evidence of their passion. So we finally have this moment where it seems like Rick is going to hook up with Jennifer, and we're so excited. And then it gets ruined because the two of them decide instead to eavesdrop on a conversation between Todd and Dee Dee, where he asks, or Todd and Dee Dee, between Jake and Dee Dee, where Jake asks Dee Dee to break up with Todd. And Dee Dee kind of says, no, you have me right now. Isn't that enough? Why do you also need me to break up with my boyfriend? And that is where we leave off for today.